Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Milo, and you're listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. At Physician Empowerment, we're focused on transforming the lives of Canadian physicians through education and finance, practice transformation, wellness, and leadership. After you've listened to today's episode, I encourage you to visit us at phys.empowerment.ca, that's PHYS, empowerment.ca, to learn more about the many resources we have to help you make that change in your own life, practice, and personal finances. Now on to today's episode.
Okay, everyone, welcome to this very unique and exciting episode at our Physician Empowerment live webinar / podcast. And today we are very, very delighted to have Obed Maurice to come to us and to have a fireside chat. And we always invite interesting people to talk about interesting topics to help you live better lives. And Obed comes from a very unique background. He's a CPA, and I think he's built a firm, and then he left it, and he's doing something else. So without further ado, we're going to talk about this topic, what you might have left out in your last tax return. That's a really funny topic. So welcome to our show, Obed. So thank you for saying yes. And would you please tell our audience a bit of your personal and professional background?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me. I always get a little bit concerned when we say tax and exciting in the same sentence. So we'll see about that. But I do think we'll be able to deliver some value today.
Right.
Personal background, born and raised in Southern Alberta, professional training in Calgary. I am a CPA, CA by trade, served some time in public practice, also in like a larger family office for 5 years, which was really, really valuable in my career to see how entrepreneurs do it from the inside. Later on in my career, I progressed. I founded one of Canada's first virtual CPA firms, which was acquired by a larger firm just before COVID. So that was kind of convenient for them, and I think good for the clients involved in that. Spent a number of years helping that firm grow and build out that model, and eventually decided to go back out and do my own thing. So one thing people should know about me is I am a diehard entrepreneur. Since I was 7 or 8 years old, I've been delivering newspapers, shoveling my neighbor's walk, trading baseball cards, those types of things. So I'm just doing more of that, but professionally these days.
Wow. So to leave a cushy job as a CPA, and so why would you leave that? And you say you built a firm, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to my entrepreneurial roots. The way I became a partner at this larger firm was we were acquired, so we were paid for the company and technology that we had built. That was the really good experience at the beginning, but I learned pretty quickly after a number of years it's really tough to get entrepreneurial things done in a larger practice with a huge executive committee and those types of things. So part of it was just the entrepreneurial bug was calling. The other half was I found it really tough to do what I felt was right for clients. There's a lot of, in a big firm, billable metrics, compliance type orientation. And as we changed managing partners, it just got harder and harder for me to practice in a way that was really, really important to me. It was actually so important. It's what led to me starting my first company. So cushy job. A lot of people strive to become partner. I guess my philosophy is, I can be partner anytime. I've built and sold a firm. I can do it again. But at the core of it, I really wanted to do holistic financial wellness. I had seen it work for our clients. And, when you get into these larger firms where the focus is tax and compliance, you just, you're pulled away from that. And that's really tough to do from, it sounds flaky, but from a spiritual or internal scorecard perspective, I didn't see myself practicing that way for the next 30 years of my life.
Oh, so tell us what you're up to these days.
Yeah, for sure. So we built something. I don't know if any of the listeners here will be familiar with a family office or multi-family office model, but essentially it's a holistic or a comprehensive view of someone's finances, and we start with planning. We're not salesmen, we're not product pushers, we're not anything like that. We do pretty intense financial planning for the entrepreneurs we work with, and then we cover a broad range of areas like retirement, investments, practice management, estate, legal, health. wing, as you know, executive health.
Yeah.
So we're trying to bring all of those things together to really enhance the entrepreneur's overall wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And as you might have experienced yourself, that doesn't usually happen at an accounting firm. We might do really great tax work, but we're not really focused on building entrepreneur wealth. And that's what we decided to go out and build, is like a really high level advisory firm that's just truly focused on building wealth, not through product, although that may be part of it, mostly through advisory, professional services, and then a little bit of implementation around product if the need fits. So definitely the right fit for me, and so far so good with the clients we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So let's get on to today's topic, right?
Yep.
What you might have left out in your last tax return. Of course, most of us just finish our tax return,
Mm-hmm.
cough up more money. Some of us get some money back. I'm very thankful because of meticulous tax planning with my team. I got very good money back.
Perfect.
My whole family, actually. No, our kids, poor kids, have to pay a little bit. So, but yeah. So what we could have left out? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. I think let me start in the broad sense of most people's experience at an accounting firm is very reactive. You know, they get their books in. You know, there's a big push to kind of meet the deadline. There's not a lot of discussion around building wealth, saving taxes, those types of things.
Right.
Most of the consultations that happens with people like yourself happen kind of after year end. Of course, you have a great accountant and that doesn't happen. But for a lot of the people listening today, they would have been in a reactive type relationship with their professionals. That's
Mhm.
kind of in the larger sense. They just absolutely missed the whole planning conversation entirely. It
Mhm.
was mostly rushing to get the year end done, maybe rounding up a few records, trying to do a little bit of retroactive kind of massaging of things. But by and large, it's just taking what's already there and fitting it into a compliance model versus, you know, the work that we're going to talk about today, which is more proactive planning and kind of anticipating some of the opportunities that your listeners will have. So a really simple example is compensation planning, the whole salary versus dividends thing, the whole
Mhm.
minimizing lifetime tax. You know, there's a difference between reducing current year tax and reducing lifetime tax. As a lot of people listening today probably are aware, tax will be the largest, you know, expense of their life. And oftentimes we only think about it kind of year by year, as opposed to, you know, an entire range of years, like 20, 30, 40 years. So I think that's one most people miss right out of the gates, is just the compensation, the mix, salary versus
Right.
dividends, but also the amount, and optimizing things like your shareholder balance and lifetime tax minimization.
So a couple of points here. Number one, you say most accounting firms are reactive, right? So then I actually quote a personal example. The first 10 years, I had a very conservative accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, just do this A, B, C, D, right? And I didn't know better. I was brand new in practice. And I went, got curious and took some seminars, talks here and there. And by about year 10, we could do some. I came back and I asked my wife, who had some finance background, say, hey, honey, I think we could do this and get some tax write-off.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, are you sure? Let's run it by John, like fictitious, whatever name, John, right?
Mm-hmm.
John, the accountant. And John said, sure, do it. Oh, okay, I got 10 grand back. And then, so I got really excited. And then I called John back and said, hey, could we have done this last year? He said, yeah, we could have done it. John, could we have done this 10 years ago when I started with
Yep.
you? Yeah. And that was the last conversation we ever had with
I
John.
love it. You know, it's such a great story, Wing, because, you know, a lot of times it is the client bringing some of these ideas forward. Oftentimes it's a client that's thinking more intensely about their financial affairs than the qualified professional. And that's a problem we're really trying to solve. It's just allowing for that hour or two of deep thought about everyone's financial affairs instead of just, you know, reactively putting out the fires. But great example of 10 years had passed by and it was actually you that had raised the opportunity. And, you know, there's no getting those 10 years back, which is unfortunate. And I know obviously you're progressing now and making a lot of great moves, but for a lot of people listening, one of the hopes that I hope that they take away from today is kind of taking action early, because as those 10 years pass by, that can turn into 20 and 30, and those opportunities really add up. So the sooner the better from my perspective.
So what you're saying is there are two camps, right? So let's say camp A, we call them the tax filers.
Mm-hmm.
right, can be other tax planners.
Yep.
And you thought you paid a fee, and some you pay exorbitant fee, and you thought they'll do it all.
Hmm.
So what were the difference between these two camps, like the thinking and why they would do that?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it comes down to the process. I mean, assuming that we're hiring a CPA or qualified professional,
Sure.
a lot of them have the technical ability to be good advisors. They've taken their professional development, they've worked in public practice for a number of years. They should have a good idea of the opportunities. What happens is internally, like in the firm, they just don't have the time to sit and think about each client, like not even for 15 or 20 minutes. So I think one of the big differences really just like their practice style. Do they have a discovery and a diagnostic process, even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes where they can catch up with their clients, learn what's new, learn if any big changes are on the horizon, and just allowing for that 15, I mean, for us it's hours, but I would be looking for someone that even was prepared to spend half an hour of really, really deep thought on my work. And I think that's really one of the major differences. Of course, there's other technical differences. Are they a CFP? Have they built their own company themselves? Are they just oriented towards optimizing, or are they conservative? There's other kind of nuances there. But I think that the biggest one is, have they have they allowed for them the bandwidth to stop and think for just a small moment of time? Or are they more like in your work, ER style, like they're just kind of taking whatever comes in the door, I assume? I don't know. Versus someone who's more of a wellness practitioner that's thinking more long term, has a little more tools available to help the client kind of think longer term. So that's, I mean, a couple big ones right off the top of my head that I see all the time. And I think unfortunately people go to an accountant believing that they're all the same, and they're quite different. And as you pointed out earlier, the experience can have pretty huge financial results depending on who you pick.
So here's the dilemma, right? So from my personal experience 20 years ago, to I've talked to gazillion people, and through physician empowerment, we talked to more people.
Yeah,
And then they said, well, how do we know, right? We're laymen in this field, right?
absolutely.
And we put the CPA up top of the pedestal,
Hmm.
and we're just hoping and praying this guy's doing the right thing. So how do we know? How do we counter check whether our guy did what they're supposed to? How are
Yeah.
we supposed to?
Yeah. A couple of things to look out for right away are they getting a hold of us like proactively before our year end or after year end? Another one is, what kind of questions they're asking us. Do they have kind of a personal interest? Can you kind of sense their curiosity? Do they have like a literal process, like a checklist or something that they're asking all of their clients beforehand? This is a very difficult thing to do off the top of your head. It takes a ton of cognitive bandwidth to run through each client's lives and priorities. So I'd be looking for like a discovery process, even if it's a really, really small one, even if it's something like one of the junior associates reaching out, but somehow they're capturing the relevant details and the changes to what happened last year,
Right.
and then setting up a conversation just to firm up the details and get a sense of what's important in your life. And it can be super simple, like, hey, Wing, I'm planning for my kid's education. That's a big deal that's coming up. We just had our second kid. We need to start thinking about the future. These little details, we need to be capturing them well ahead. So for those folks out there thinking, is my guy the right guy? I would be really be looking for that proactive communication, and I'd be looking at the process they have to understand my situation. It's like I just went in for my health thing my annual checkup. Same thing every time. Nurse takes my height, weight, a couple tests. I mean, if they skipped that step and my doctor started giving me advice, I'd be worried. But I just know that she has a reliable process that kind of helps her capture some of the details she needs to be a great physician. If we were skipping those steps in the medical field, we should be worried. And I'd say there's a similar style that I'd be looking for in the financial services field.
Well, I was just going to bring it up. In my world, we have annual physicals, right? As a family physician, right? And we do a thorough job. And if we don't take a history,
Yeah.
right? Hello. And actually, I just came back from a cruise in Japan where I was teaching. I met a lot of doctors in the province of BC. They did away with physicals, right? You cannot
Oh, really?
insure that, right? So it's like just go through the motion, right? So if you can lose the forest by the trees, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we call episodic care versus the comprehensive care, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're driving at, right? Kind of in the lingo that we can understand, right?
It is.
They need to be proactive. We have now we call life stage appropriate advice and investigation,
Yeah.
right? Different life stages. And I find it more and more, the more I travel, the more we do this, found that physicians and health professionals, and for the matter, incorporated professionals, are more alike than different. No matter what specialty, East, West Coast, and even this time I met a bunch of Americans, we're really more alike than different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our makeup, the way we deal with things, our needs, our niche, it's actually very similar,
Oh,
right? And so if we have the same playbook throughout, it's like my kids went to high school and Mrs. Jones taught Macbeth for 40 years, never changed the lesson plan,
mm-hmm.
right? And Macbeth doesn't change, but tax codes do.
Oh, like I remember I knew the moment I shouldn't be a partner at a big firm. I was sitting in a year-end meeting. The engagement team, I think there was 6 or 7 of them there. They spent an hour explaining to me all the things they were going to do for this client on this engagement. At the end of it, I said, "Great, that's awesome, everyone. What's the client's name? Not the company. I mean the actual client.
Right,
Like who owns this company?"
right,
Nobody, not a single person could tell me the owner. They could tell me the name of the company, but not the owner. And then I said, "Can anyone tell me what her goals are? Like, what's her biggest priorities this year? What are the biggest things happening in this client's life?" And of
right.
course, nobody knew. But the truth was, like, her husband had cancer.
Mhm.
She was just starting up a new business line. She's trying to help her daughter buy a new home, and all
Right,
these really, really important details about her life were not accounted for in the year end tax planning and financial plan. And that was the process of the firm that I was at. So I knew there's just absolutely no way that we can keep practicing like this and deliver the results I think, that people should be getting. So you're absolutely right. Macbeth stays the same, but the process is the lesson plan. We absolutely need to be updating those to make
right.
sure we're progressing through.
Right on. So the whole goal of physician empowerment is to empower people to ask smarter questions, right?
Yep.
To their advisors and to discover whether they have a right fit, have they outgrown their advisors, right? Or they should
Hmm.
keep them, but ask smarter questions, or they should have other teammates coming in the professional team, right? So in your professional work from the traditional CPA to now, I think you do what we call the 360, right? The total wealth planning more than just the filing, right? So
Yep.
what would be some of the most common faux pas that you encountered in this accounting thing, tax filing,
Yeah.
planning? Like, let's broad brush early stage of career, mid stage, and late stage. Can you highlight us?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some classics, early stages, when should I incorporate? Oftentimes you'll see, actually, one of my friends I articled with, he actually ended up quitting becoming an accountant and became a doctor. So he
Wow.
ended up failing to incorporate for several years. He just, nobody really talked to him about medical PCs, what that
Mhm.
meant, what deferred income meant. So whatever he was billing, Alberta Health just coming right into his personal income. It's a
Mhm.
classic you see at the early stage is you're so focused on the student loans and you're not even aware of all the opportunities you have financially as a physician. You're
Mhm.
just kind of happy. In his case, he's just happy to be a physician, practicing physician, and
Mhm.
really no awareness or financial planning at all. So
Right.
I'd say early stage, that's something that just, I don't want to say ignorance, but really a lack of understanding around the power and just getting the fundamentals right around, incorporating insurance, billing practices, etc. Just getting those real fundamentals dialed in so
Mhm.
that we can then move on to the mid stage. And I think at the mid stage, what we see a lot of times is people are thinking about they maybe have a young family, they maybe their priorities have changed, they're a bit more of a seasoned pro now, and they're now missing things like their compensation mix is a real classic in the mid stage. They're not thinking about salaries versus dividends, how to
Mhm.
optimize retirement planning,
Mhm.
disability, health spending accounts, those kind of real table stakes
Mhm.
of financial planning. And then, of course, as you get into the more mature phase, we're looking at structure, intercompany dividends, estate planning. I know TOSI or income splitting is a little bit of a challenge for professionals, physicians especially. They seem to really want to target, but there are income splitting opportunities through various structures. They kind of get into more, they've accumulated a lot more wealth, but still haven't really optimized. And again, just kind of going back to my doctor, she's more in the mature stage. We were chatting finances at my last visit, and she hadn't really put a lot of thought into how she's going to spend her life post practicing as a physician, spending her life in California and elsewhere. And so setting herself up for making some of those international purchases, they're just kind of left, we'll do it somewhere. But the truth is, at that mature stage, she has a ton of earning potential. She can go anywhere. She can do anything. She's accumulated a ton of net worth, but still doesn't have that like really detailed financial plan dialed in. You see that happen all the time of, time has passed and they just haven't implemented some of the things they've learned along the way, kind of get kicked down the road. And now's the time at that mature stage to get it done and set themselves up for the future.
So what if they didn't get those, like say, critical structures set up in time? So what's left on the table? Like how impactful would that be? Doing it right versus wrong?
Yeah. You'd be shocked. Like it would be millions for sure. Like I was just looking at a couple of our plans as I was preparing for this meeting. And one of the things we do at the end of our financial plans is we take base scenario. So here's where you're at today and what your life would look like if you continue doing that versus an optimized scenario. And then some kind of randomized versions of that to stress test it. And it's usually anywhere between 400 to 700% better. So 400 to 700% improvements from the
4 to
base
7
scenario.
fold better.
Yes.
Holy moly, those are ginormous numbers.
It's the one thing I hope people take away from our conversations. They really underestimate the long-term impact of really, really small things. And we're not talking crazy things. We're talking the right salary mix. We're talking the right strategy. We're talking the right return on your investments. The difference between 5% and 6.7% over 20 years. These are humongous differences in results. And I think people really underestimate the simplicity of great financial hygiene and the long-term impact. Those would be the two things. So it's very, very surprising when we put those numbers in front of people. And they're not fantasies. Like we go through the process of stress testing and randomizing returns and inflation and all that stuff to make sure it's a realistic view. And time again, people are surprised at what's
right. So let me echo what you say with two live examples. One is a neighbor of mine, a very prominent specialist, I don't want to mention name, right? But
sure.
He had the same accountant as me. I didn't know that. And I think for 20, 30 years, he never had a PC because the accountant says you spend it all anyways.
Yeah.
So this guy, right, same thing. So another one, incorporated guy just retired and he's got massive wealth. And so, there's a lot of structure that need to be dealt with. He was lucky enough to have sold his shares. And because he didn't listen, right, he never got that advantage of the lifetime capital gains exemption. So that's out.
Oh.
That's a mill. And then there's intergenerational wealth, all that tax planning. So with Plan A, and actually he was consulting with your partner, Simon, and with the tax law. And I overheard that Plan A versus Plan B was probably about single-digit million, like less than 10, but a lot, $3 or $5 million difference, Plan A versus Plan B. But that's in perpetuity, right? Like upon death, right? The estate. And that's already staggering number, right? So I think those are something to take home, but it's a little far for a lot of people to catch on. But what you're saying, even in 11 years, could be 4 to 7-fold difference, right?
It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like I've personally witnessed many self-made millionaires, people coming from university with, 2 nickels to rub together, now multimillionaires 10 and 15 years later. Like it's unbelievable what people are capable of if they take the right action. And, I really believe physicians obviously are incredibly well educated and intelligent. I mean, this is definitely not rocket science. The secret is all in the execution and like the work you're doing, just education, educating people on what the opportunities are and executing on them. Nothing tricky at all.
Right. So let's put this in some perspective, right? I tell people it's like an orchestra, right? Like there you got the woodwind, you got the string, you got the brass, you got the percussion. They have to work together, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's not going to work. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of noise, like grade seven, first music band class, right?
Yeah.
So, but I actually find it again firsthand experience that the big guys in my life, they don't play together. They all do their
Mhm.
own thing, right? So where would you place the accountant versus the lawyer, the financial planner, insurance guy, banker? How would you put them?
Yeah, I think you used a great anecdote there. Like the everyone is kind of playing their own instrument, and there is no master plan. There's no
No
there's no
conductor.
harmony, no conductor, right? And I think that's really the role that we look to play. And I think you can look to a few things there. One of them is incentives for sure. We're one of the very few businesses that are incentivized to be the conductor. Most of the other practitioners are charged just by their billable hour, or they're selling you a product. They literally have no process at all to understand the needs and to kind of conduct that symphony over several years. And a lot of it is just billable hours. Like a law firm, they take on whatever clients come their way. Their internally partners are compensated by billable metrics. Client experience and client improvement isn't even one of the categories that's measured at an accounting firm. Like nobody looks to see, are our clients becoming wealthier, other than financial planners. An accountant strictly compensated on billable hours, which is not a knock. I understand that's a great business model, but I really do believe that there are very, very few professionals out there that are even willing to play that role of holistic advisor. And I think it's coming online now. It's very prevalent in the US. It's a lot more common, the multifamily office approach to client service. But up in Canada, we don't see it as much. And I think a lot of it comes down to incentives, philosophy, and honestly, like orientation of practitioner. Like it's just as simple as, psychology of like me, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building businesses since I was 7 years old. Not a lot of accounting partners have gone down that road. Typically, they've gone to school. They just wanted to get a good job. Eventually, they made partner, and finally, they're making their big salary. They literally don't have the perspective or even interest in something like that.
So AKA they're very risk adverse.
Yeah. And I would look at someone like you, Wing, as a really good example of someone who's just more entrepreneurial oriented. Like you're just more interested, you're more curious. And that'd be one thing if I was shopping for an accountant that I would be looking for is, how curious and interested are they in just the idea of wealth creation versus just kind of getting me in and out the door. And I really think it is it's a I don't want to say a gift, but it's a skill that some people just don't have. And I think so all those folks, the banker, the lawyer, the accountant, the insurance guy, they're just trying to get their little piece done. They're not they don't have, a real long-term interest, and the incentives don't align to it. They're just trying to
Well,
get
I think
insurance.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree with you more, Obed, because I found that again through personal experience, and I'm at the shorter end, or as a quote victim, that everybody's trying to make some money off me, right? And
Yep.
and so salesmanship is masqueraded as advice slash education.
Yep.
Right. And in our world, we can relate if the drug rep, right, the pharmaceutical rep, they come, right? And we need them, right? They have an ecosystem there. They
For
need to
sure.
update us on medications, give us some samples to try on our patients. But if we only take up education on new drugs by the sales reps, it is not even ethical.
It's one of our founding principles as an advice first firm is that one of the reasons we charge for financial planning is so that we have absolutely no bias at all, whether or not someone invests with us, if they do their tax work with us, if they work with our insurance companies and other services. We want them, we want us as advisors to have absolutely no bias at all, whether or not, hey, we get paid whether or not you you use our wealth management arm or not. So I think that's one of the keys for sure is that
So
that
what you're
advice.
saying is a new it's not new, but I think to a lot of us, a new breed of advice that is not free advice buried into
Yeah.
hidden fees and commissions and whatever, but a fee-based advice that is here. This is a product agnostic, right?
Yeah.
Unbiased, and you get what we're here to plan for your life. So, right. So we were trying to say that, right?
Yeah. I think you summarize that quite well.
And I think that is so rare. And for us, I can tell you that doctors are very cheap, right? When we were residents, interns, we were so hungry. They feed us pizza. We call those pizza rounds, and usually those are the banks, and the drug companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just condition me like Pavlov dog, right? Salivate and you're listening, right? And then we grew up with that. Then we got all these people who fake to be true advisors, but
Yeah.
they only give you what they sell, right? Be it the bank or the insurance guy, right? And so there's a lot of conflict of interest, right? And
Oh,
it's
I've seen it a lot as a partner at a bigger firm. People often would ask me, "Hey, how do I become partner?" I'm thinking of developing a service line towards dentists or lawyers or doctors are often on the list of higher earning people. And I always ask, what value are you intending to create for these people? I mean, are we approaching these people because we think that they're earning high income and they're a good target, or do we actually have some meaning and some value we can bring to the table? So I totally agree that the physician medical doctor would be high on the list of people that salesmen would be focusing on. And I think it comes in all shapes and sizes, and be watching that very, very closely. And I think physician empowerment is a really good example of like, hey, let's get the education out to people, make it agnostic. And I mean, doctors are pretty smart. I know maybe you're calling them cheap, and I know for sure they're conservative in many ways, but they're also pretty smart. And I think that they can execute on stuff when they want to, and you got to be careful of what you're executing on.
right. And we also, because the way that we're brought up inside a system, right? It's a huge hierarchy,
Mm,
right? So when we accept the authority, we become very, very loyal. And sometimes to a point that we don't question anymore, right? So with incredible amount of loyalty to our advisors, sometimes
mm,
to our detriment. For example, for me, the first 10 years cost me 100K to stay with that John guy, right?
hmm.
So how do we, so give us a pointer, right? How do we know, how should we think, being a critical thinker, right? How should we think about our team, right? We need to now wake up and say, holy moly, I need to ask my accountant, my lawyer, right? How should we even broach that subject or start this journey?
Yeah. Well, it's going to sound pretty, I don't know, pretty elementary, let's call it. But I think one thing I've learned, Wing, is when I do my discovery process, a lot of times the entrepreneurs aren't really clear on what their own plan is. So I'd be asking myself, do I really have a really great plan? And do my advisors know it? And oftentimes the answer is no. So it's not really, the team's fault quite yet that there's no plan. So I'd be asking, am I really solid on my plan? If I'm not, can I go out and work with the team to build a plan, whether it's financial planner, CPA like myself? You could be surprised. You could be a lawyer, someone like that. But looking to my network, who would be the best person to really help me develop a solid financial game plan? And then taking that to the team and seeing what kind of buy-in you get. Sometimes you'll see pretty dismissive practitioners. They might even forget. They might not ask for a copy. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly whether or not people buy into it. But if I was a physician and I was as busy as a physician, I would be looking for that quarterback, that person who could really help me develop my plan and then be that point man while I was out there making my money and making all of my plays. And really, I mean, self-serving, that's actually what I do. But I've have experience years as a partner in a big firm watching lawyers and other professionals just not have an interest in the plan. Somebody needs to step up and take ownership. I think
Right.
it's going to be hard for a physician to do that long term. I
Mhm.
think you can cause it to happen, but being the expert all the time, you're busy doing medical stuff and it's going to be hard. So I'd say step number one, just get that plan on the table, work with a professional. It'll be the best money you ever spend in your life. And then once you have that, it'll be like a new set of glasses that you'll take that and show people and talk to them about it. and they might not even know what you're talking about. Like your experience 10 years ago, Wing, where the accountant like literally hadn't thought of the thing that you thought of. And you'll see that it'll just be so clear because it's now clear to you, if that makes any sense, who's the right fit and who's not.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I want to clarify that we're not here to knock anybody off, right? Most people
Oh,
are
for sure.
professional. Everybody have
Yeah,
their biases, as we understand, right? And we're not saying that you need to revolt against somebody, and we're not saying somebody is jipping somebody, right? It's
nope,
just that everybody have their own needs and wants. Sometimes we don't even know what we don't want. What we
for
want.
sure.
It's called double ignorance, right? We don't know what we know or don't know, right? And
Yeah,
so we're here to empower everyone. So I thank you, Obed. So this is I hope this conversation sparkles a few synapses and hopefully sparkles some conversations with your spouse, with your significant others, with your family and your maybe business partners, right? And significant others that would emanate to your whole team, right? One example is IPP, right? You know, a lot of
yeah,
us incorporated physicians should be thinking about IPP versus RSP versus DeFi, like you brought up, right?
yeah.
And I used to be involved with a company, with IPP company, and found that most run-of-the-mill accountants are very objectionable to IPPs. They wouldn't
They
even
are.
talk, right? And we
Yep.
found that to have that conversation, interdisciplinary team conference even, that
Hmm.
itself is a rare bird, right? So I think we all deserve that, and we should actually to say that, hey, I deserve one of those. Like I do geriatrics, a lot of geriatric care. With family conference, we have team conference all the time on my
Hmm.
patients, right? We as incorporated physicians and professionals, we deserve one of these team care, right? Not just one guy winging it, right? You
Yeah.
know?
It's such a good example too. And you see the reservations of the CPA, and it's a really good product. If you study it and you look at the benefits for someone like a higher income earning professional, there's a lot to be interested in. And to just dismiss it right away, I think is not what people need.
Right. And that's actually just a plug for it. Our next masterclass coming up in a couple weeks is called To Be or Not to Be. It's the IPP for me. So we can explore all that in detail. So sign up for that. So thank you again, Obed. This has been really enlightening and really, really super fun. We'll absolutely have you come back and talk to us a lot more. Okay.
Thanks for having me. You bet.
Thank you so much for listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. If you're ready to take those next steps in transforming your practice, finances, or personal well-being, then come and join us at phys-empowerment.ca, PHYS empowerment.ca, to learn more about how we can help. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would share our podcast with a colleague or friend, and head over to Apple Podcasts to give us a 5-star rating and review. If you've got feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episode topics, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to join us and be interviewed and share some of your story, we'd absolutely love that as well. Please send me an email at kmilo@phys-empowerment.ca. Thank you again for listening. Bye.